Okay. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Steve Mattel. I am this year's president of the EWEB board. Welcome to the final meeting of the 2020 calendar year. We have a relatively light agenda, but some significant items on it nonetheless. Light in terms of, I guess, the time it'll take to get through it all, but some significant items nonetheless. We will start with the agenda check. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any concerns about the agenda as it's been published?
I do.
All right then.
Steve, I just number 13. I was just thinking of, I mean, that's to heap praise upon you and Commissioner Helgeson for 15 minutes. Can we just move that down to like 1 minute and then use the extra time for something else? Is that adequate?
I see how the evening is going to go. Well, you know, I had to approve the agenda and a week ago or so with Commissioner Schlossberg, by the way, and I purposely held back and let her make the first motion, and she chose to leave it. So out of respect for Mindy, I would have reduced that amount of time as well, but out of respect for Mindy, our future board president, I thought I would just leave it.
Okay, I'll acquiesce and let you have that time.
John, I just want to say that I also saw your comment on the board survey, and you'll get your wish at the end of the day. So just if you're just patient and can live through that 15 minutes, I think you'll be okay.
But you just wait and make sure you don't cast stones in a glass house, because I'm not sure where that comment came from, Dick.
Yeah, Dick, in fairness, Dick, that was my comment. That I think you're referring to. Nonetheless, we're going to move right on before we descend into chaos here. All right, item number 2, we have items from board members and the general manager. We will start with Commissioner Schlossberg.
I have nothing for this month. Been a quiet month.
Commissioner Carlson.
I'm the same. I'll let it pass and reserve for other things later in the event here.
All right, fair enough. Commissioner Helgeson?
I will pass as well, thank you.
Unusual. Well, Commissioner Brown?
Yeah, 2 things. We had our quarterly OPEB meeting, and to summarize it, things are in good shape. The financial health of post-employment benefits is good. And it's in good, I think it's in really good hands. Also, I got an email from some people at Summit Bank that participated in a Run to Stay Warm. I didn't even know what was going on. I apologize, but they had like 14 participants and they made a $500 donation. I think it was a success. So those are a couple good things. So that's all I have.
Okay, well, great. I'll just add in a couple of things. One, I have a monthly call with my counterpart over at Sub. Currently, John DeWinter is the board president there. He is stepping down, as am I, and Mike Eister will likely be elected their board chair at their January meeting. And we have scheduled a meeting for the 2 of them, plus me and Commissioner Schlossberg, just essentially pass the torch and get Mindy and Mike up to speed on the kind of the normal procedures that John and I have walked through, just to help keep our 2 boards apprised of important actions that are taking place. So that's scheduled. I believe it's next Friday. And other than that, I don't believe I have anything else. Frank?
Thank you, President Mattel. Commissioners, good evening. I have a few things. Mostly wanted to provide a COVID update to the board. So let me just want to make sure my sound was on. From a COVID perspective, the utility continues to operate under COVID protocols intended to preserve our workforce capacity. Presently, we have 2 active cases and 5 employees under quarantine. All of those are from external and non-work related exposures. EWEB saw minimal impact last month from COVID relative to consumption, but in the year to date, still running about 3.8% year to date down on electric consumption, there's been really no measurable impact on the water side of the utility. Our collections are fairly stable at the moment. Our 90-day aging has increased a little bit over the last few weeks. We presently have 538 disconnect orders that are active. Just for your reference, that reached a high of about 3,000 kind of mid-year, so significantly down from that. A little elevated compared to our pre-COVID disconnect order level of between 200 and 400, so a little bit elevated there, and kind of steadying out. We continue to sign up people for various kinds of payment plans at this point. As of about 2 o'clock this afternoon, we'd received about 60 customer care aid applications for the month. That means there's still 314 spots available for December. And we have given out, if you remember last month, we talked about the city's funds that came through the CARES Act. Those have been, the 150,000 there has been fully distributed to about 600 customers, with another 76,000 or so distributed to nonprofit or childcare providers. There's a little bit left on that side of the grant program of about 24,000. And so in general, we continue to operate well. In the spirit of Thanksgiving, I really like to thank the commissioners and staff for what will likely turn out to be a pretty memorable year, 2020. And all in all, operations have gone well, and staff and has performed quite well, and the commissioners have provided great guidance this year. So that's it from me, President Mattel.
All righty, well, thank you very much. I'm just going to say one last thing prior to moving to item number 3. I know that we're joking a little bit, and we have this appreciation, so to speak, deep into the meeting for staff who may not, who may sign off earlier. I just wanted to say on my own behalf, and Dick may have something to say himself. It's my last meeting. And I have just thoroughly appreciated my 8 years on the board, and the highlights have included, I'll say more later, I suppose, if there's an opportunity, but it just included getting to know so many staff and getting to learn from you all. So if you sign off early, I totally understand that. I just wanted to say thank you. I really enjoyed my time on the board. All right, well, we will move into public input, and let me open up a public input session. I'm obligated to read a little bit of a preamble, and then I believe we have 6 speakers lined up. So public input. For those of you who are out there, when your name is called, remember to unmute your phone. Press *6 if calling from a landline, or simply use the unmute button if you're calling from a cell phone. Please state your name and optionally your address or ward, and speak clearly into your telephone. Each speaker will be offered 3 minutes to present their testimony. Please keep track of your time. If needed, the board president, myself, will notify you when your time has elapsed. After all testimony is heard, each of the commissioners will have an opportunity to speak if they choose, although by policy, we do not engage in a back and forth dialogue, although of course sometimes we do. Please note that failure of a commissioner to speak shall not be construed as support of or opposition to any speaker's testimony. If a question is presented by a speaker and the board does not provide an answer, an EWEB staff member will contact the speaker so that the question can be addressed at a later time. Alrighty, I believe first up we have Tana Shepard.
All right, if you would pause and starting mine for 1 minute. No, I'm just kidding. I'll do my best. So hello, commissioners and Frank, and I'd just like to thank you for continuing to support education in 4J in this time of change and unknowns. The global pause has evoked creativity, collaboration, and innovation with our programming and ways to serve students and teachers virtually. And so this is what I've been up to. Virtual salmon in the classrooms. I have 50 teachers accessing it currently, but there are more. I just kind of gave up on that and just wanted to have as many kids getting access as possible. I'll recoup that later, but it's involved a salmon take in my home for tank life videos and observations, designing a digital unit available through Google and the Seesaw platform, a YouTube channel called Eco Chick, and you can see the videos there. I can share a link. That's where the tank life videos virtual field trips and interviews with experts live. I've been doing some Zoom classroom visits. And so far, the feedback has just been extremely positive. Many teachers have written in thanks to say this has been a bright spot in the comprehensive distance learning. It's decreased their workload, and the students are loving it as much as they can virtually anyway. So this is being developed in real time, but it's going to be a continued resource for years to come, and it's been welcome to have the that I have missed the field trips and all that a lot. I'm continuing to work with middle school science teachers to vision and plan for distance learning. It's involved meeting and sharing resources, planning units, and we are not sure what's going to be happening after the new year with hybrid, etc. So trying to figure out how wind and solar will fit, or if there's something else that we might innovate around. Elementary science support has essentially just been working with our STEM specialists, and we provided science materials to the elementary students at the beginning of the year to have a hands-on, access to the experience at home. I did start a newsletter called the STEAM Blast, powered by 4J EWEB Education Partnership, and that's mostly for teachers to just stay connected with us because we can't see each other, and so that's been pretty well utilized. With the climate education, I've continued to work with and develop our 4J climate justice team. It's comprised of staff and high school students, and our focus is on climate education across our district and collaborating at the state level. And the students actually had audience with the Oregon Department of Education and are involved in we're going to get involved with helping the state move forward with this too. So it's kind of a big endeavor, and it's pretty exciting. And then we'll see where EWEB lessons are going to fit in, but we're developing lessons across multiple subject areas, not just science, and they'll be piloted across the district by teachers. And so that's pretty cool. And then Pledge to Prepare, I really have a lot of aspirations on how to get this information out to families, especially because it's a January calendar. So I'm hoping to get that out to families after the new year. I do have a question, and just in general about resources on the website. Is there any plan for Spanish translation at any point? Just to put that out there, it would be a great access point. And just working on website changes. I'm dumping WordPress and going with a Google site for easier, it's just a nicer looking, easier platform. Continuing the Love Food Not Waste partnership and with the city and the county, and in particular focusing on how much water it takes to process foods, and and just how the seepage of landfills gets into our groundwater. And then finally, just with this being the beginning of the new 5-year grant cycle, we've just been using this time to strategically work toward the grant goals while simultaneously meeting the needs of the current education model we're working within. So there's lots of ideas and possibilities to not only serve our students now, but in the years to come. And then I'll just end with best to Dick and Steve. I really enjoyed getting to know you over these years, and I wish you best, and I'll miss heckling you, Steve, especially you. So anyway, and thank you. I just really appreciate you giving me the extra time. I know I went over, so.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have Stephen Goldman.
Yes, hi. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I live at 1495 West Hilliard Lane in North Eugene. That's Sonia Carlson's ward. I have two main points, requesting that EWEB adopt an annual net metering policy for solar producers like myself, similar to the EPUD and PG&E policies, which are annual net metering policies, as opposed to EWEB's monthly net metering. And the second thing is to drop or change EWEB's solar access standard of 85% access threshold before you give any of those incentives away. Hello?
You're still there.
Oh, okay. Sorry, just got a call. Anyway, I've lived in this neighborhood for 10 years. I paid into the Green Power program all this time to support green power, but when it came to do green power in my own house, I get 0 from EWEB. I put in a system that cost me over $24,000. I had to save on a small state pension and Social Security for 10 years to afford this. So it was really disappointing to get 0 from EWEB. And yet, even though I have some shading from a tree, by adding some extra panels, I still meet 100% of my annual electricity consumption on my all-electric home with the system that was put in. And unfortunately, the payback on this system is going to be hugely long, more than 15 years, probably more than 20 years, because EWEB's policies only pay at 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour for surplus power beyond what I consume. And an annual net metering would give me credit for my power consumption during these winter months, like now, when I don't produce enough power and I have to buy at 9.1 cents. So I looked at EPUD's policy. I looked at PG&E's policy. They have a policies that provide more incentive for putting in more solar. Why is it important to do this? Because it encourages more renewable energy production, more systems, and larger systems. And it also provides jobs for local contractors. And well, maybe EWEB doesn't need to buy more power now, but with more electric cars being bought by people, more people moving to Eugene, you will eventually need more electricity, and it's better to buy that electricity locally. It doesn't require transmission for hundreds or thousands of miles. It's produced locally. And you know, you say, well, you have hydropower, it's clean energy, whatever, but it results in damming rivers and destroying fisheries like the Columbia and Snake River fisheries. So it's not a zero impact energy. But the hydropower is important because it's a good backup system for solar power, which you don't get when the sun's not shining.
All right, Mr. Goldman, I'm going to ask you to wrap up in the next 10 or 15 seconds.
Okay. So the other issue is the shading issue. Like, the federal government doesn't limit shading. Why should you limit shading? Let the customer decide. You can meet shading needs without cutting trees. Don't encourage people to cut trees down. That's not a good policy. Anyway, I provided my testimony in writing so you can read it because I had to rush through it. I didn't finish everything, but please read what I said in writing because I had more time to explain it.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Goldman. Before we move on to our next speaker, that's Stephen Anderson, but before we move on, and just a point of order, normally we have a clock where I can see, but our speakers as well can see how much time has elapsed of their 3 minutes. Is that not functioning tonight, or is it my job to try to remind folks where they are within their 3 minutes?
My apologies, President Maitel. I had someone in the lobby that I was trying to identify, and so I missed restarting the timer, but it is on the screen, and I've got it reset and ready to go for the next speaker.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, well, next up we have Stephen Anderson.
Yes, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, I'm back like a bad penny to talk again about the 40th and Hilliard tank site. Now that we have the geologic drilling report, I think it's time to seriously look at the Site 2 tank site for the first tank. It's the easiest and fastest place to construct tank number 1. We now know it's a rocky hill, exactly what we thought, basalt columns that fracture easily. So there's no impediment whatsoever. There's plenty of parking on the meadow for equipment, and the meadow is not original. So once the tank is built, you can bring back native grasses, which I believe is the plan. So also, you could be spending time creating habitat to the west. So when it is time to replace the big timber for tank 2 in the future, we'll have more habitat, which we're going to lose now en masse if you allow the staff to do what they're planning, which is to clear cut all the trees for both tanks now. EWEB claims to be a good neighbor, and yet here we are looking at tank site number 1, which is right on top of exactly one neighbor on an 11-acre site. This is not necessary. Please, EWEB commissioners, weigh in on this legacy project and actually take our concerns to heart. It's amazing the tank sites were decided before you even received a habitat assessment. which you completed at a time of year when the least birds and animals are present. So that's all I have to say. I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. Next up, we have Sandra Bishop.
Hello, thank you. I'm on a phone, so I don't have, I can't see the time clock, but I'll try to make it fast. My name is Sandra Bishop. I'm at 4096 Hilliard Street, and thank you for allowing me to address the board this evening. I'm here to speak about the water tank project, as Mr. Anderson just referred to it. I'm here to ask that the board direct the staff to come back to the board with facts addressing an alternative location for the first tank that's going to be built next year, or the building will start next year. Specifically, as Steve Anderson just said, please look at the efficacy of building the first tank on site 2, which is in the saddle of the hill, closer to the middle of the 10 or 12 acres on this site, rather than at the extreme eastern corner. I've done some more research. Others have surveyed the trees and the land a little bit closer. The problem is there's no question that we need updated water storage in South Eugene. That's not an issue at all. The problem is exactly where the location of this first tank will be. And the description on the EWEB website of this being a vacant land is really deceptive in a way. There's a rocky outcropping bordered on an open meadow, and it's home to a mature forest habitat. There are 100-year-old fir pine intermingled with a variety of other ages and species of trees, shrubs, plants. It also includes 250-year-old firs that grew up as part of the original oak open grassland. This patch of forest was defining the landscape 80 or 90 years before Oregon became a state. The point being, this habitat has grown up over centuries. The acreage is now a balanced ecosystem. So EWEB, the problem is the location of this first tank being pushed to the extreme southeast corner of the property. That will entail immediate removal of the oldest, most dense section of this forested area. It will devastate the oldest growth trees, even though the second tank site in the middle, more to the middle, a little bit to the west, it's in a saddle, a natural saddle, and it's on the border of the meadow. That's not expected to be used for another 10 years. So proceeding as planned, the habitat's going to be decimated now unnecessarily a decade before it's really needed. So that's the problem. The solution is we can have both water storage and maintain the habitat simply by putting the first tank on site 2. A lot fewer trees will be removed. So staff and board, when giving answers about the timeline, the tank location seem to be in service of really temporary benefits such as equipment parking, and there seems to be a real rush to build without adequate consideration of the disruption that's a potential for this on this precious natural resource area. So I would really, encourage people to access the property at the south end of Patterson Street off of 40th. And it's easy to see the benefit and the wisdom of locating the first tank on site 2, closer to the middle of the property, rather than clear cutting the heart out of that mature timber on the eastern end. So thank you. I really appreciate all your service, and thank you especially to Commissioners Mittal and Helgeson for all your service on the board.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Much appreciated. All right, we'll move on to, we have 2 more. Next is Joe Mull.
Good evening. For the record, Joe Mull with you. I'm the Executive Director of the Mackenzie River Trust. Chair Mittal and Commissioners, thanks again for an opportunity to speak a few words this evening. When I last spoke with you on the proposed near-term and longer-term EWEB spending plans in October, we were just a month past the holiday farm fires. We've certainly had a series of wet weather events since then, so the fires are out, and we've had a few tests of the assumptions about steep slopes and soil erosion and impacts to water quality. and more importantly, impacts to the communities from the headwaters on down. My comments 2 months ago ended with the encouragement that EWEB is indeed the organization to take a leadership role in recovery for the river and for those communities. I stand by that encouragement and just want to reiterate that tonight with a couple of observations. First, it has been a headspin of activity by many groups at all local, state, regional, and federal levels, trying to make sense of what happened, how to recover, how to better prepare for the next disaster we might face. And throughout that, EWEB staff have brought incredible clarity to those discussions. They demonstrate immediate action, near-term coordination, and long-term vision. With their leadership and your financial support, the river is already being buffered from potentially troublesome, indeed toxic runoff from some of the properties that burned along its edge. That work involves partners who've developed trust and working relationships over the last 10 years, initially all aimed at sort of proactive practice measures for watershed health, but able to mobilize on a dime, turn of a dime in this emergency situation. EWEB's leadership is also instrumental in planning for the next 3 to 5 years it's going to take for this community to recover from that fire, including navigating the maze of federal programs from FEMA and elsewhere that will prove helpful if we are deliberate and patient. We're also entering a very dark time of year, not just literally, but it's the time when disaster is beginning to fade from the broader public awareness. It's common, it's something we were warned against by peers in other states who have dealt with catastrophic fires and associated landslides. And it's something we have to guard against. So from my perspective, it makes your decisions, and some deliberation tonight, more so over the next couple months, your deliberations on the continuing to invest in the watershed, that much more important. So I just want to encourage you again to recognize and continue your commitment to that leverage for the long term, far beyond the fire recovery period. EWEB investments today in watershed health should be celebrated 50 years from now. And I think by then, John Brown will finally step down off the commission if I've done my math correctly. So finally, I'll just echo the other thanks to Commissioners Helgeson and Mital for your years of service. I've been impressed, especially with your attention to both efficiency and effectiveness. I think we toss around the word utility without even thinking about its original root long before electric and power, but the utility that you provide for the community in so many ways is something that I think the two of you have modeled well. And wish you well on that and look forward to seeing how Commissioners McRae and Borofsky fill your shoes. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joel. Always eloquent. Finally, we have Jim New.
This is Joe Harwood. I'll be reading
sorry, Joe,
Jim New's comments. That's yep. Okay. Jim New lives in Ward 7, and here's his comments. Commissioners, I wanted to express my appreciation to EWEB for the rooftop solar rebate program. I was recently a recipient of this rebate from a rooftop solar installation completed just a few months ago. However, I was disappointed to see the rebate check was issued by U.S. Bank, EWEB's financial institution. Considering the amount of monies U.S. Bank has contributed and financed for large fossil fuel projects that have added to global climate disruption, I am surprised that EWEB would continue to have business with a company with a poor climate record. I urge the EWEB board, as part of its commitment to a more climate-friendly operation, would consider divesting from U.S. Bank and explore other financial institutions that have a cleaner portfolio. The City of Eugene made a decision to use carbon-free financial institutions just a few years ago. I hope EWEB explores this possibility. Thank you for your time and service.
All right, well, thank you, Joe and Jim, both. Ann, can you just confirm that there are no other speakers in the queue?
That's correct, President Mital.
Okay, wonderful. Great. I will close the public input session and open it up to commissioners for responses. We will take it in the same order that we took input from board members just 5-10 minutes ago. So Commissioner Schlossberg, you are up first.
I don't have anything except thanking people for their testimony.
Okay, Commissioner Carlson.
All right, well, thank you very much. I really appreciated the comments tonight and the updates on the various programs that are out in the community from Tana and Joe Mole. Thank you for that. And to my constituent, I really appreciated the information that you shared regarding your particular solar array on your roof. Some of the reasoning behind that is that you have the ability to utilize the services in the wintertime, and that's not worth nothing. And the cost to offset that that benefit is pretty extensive. I mean, we have fixed costs that we have to cover throughout the system. So providing even that first kilowatt of electricity and the resiliency there has a cost. And so we've had a neutral policy so that customers that do utilize the metering are not costing others who don't utilize that benefit. Now, I'm very supportive of looking at it further. I actually looked at getting a solar array on my own house, I want to say about 10 years ago, and we had a similar situation with the shading issue in that I don't know that we couldn't get any coverage from it, but they said that it wouldn't be very effective. And I know that the technology has improved quite a bit since then. I would certainly be for me, it would certainly be worth reviewing with staff why we have some limits on shading there. And I don't know if that's what the reasoning behind that is, or if it's just the payback period because you may not be able to get the full benefit from the shading on the roof. But I would certainly be willing to look at that if it is a particular policy in place there, and would love to have a longer conversation with you at some point about your solar array and working with EWEB on solar. But I'll save that here because it's a much longer conversation. And on the banking resolution for Jim, I know he's maybe not on the call, but might hear this later. I do know that in 2017, we did pass a resolution changing some of our banking to other institutions that better align with our values. But I do understand that there are some limitations from a utility perspective and regulatory perspective on where we can put money, and some of that becomes pretty challenging. I'll let Frank delve into that a little bit further if he wants to, but thank you for bringing that up. It's definitely something that we have in the past looked at as a board.
All right, Commissioner Helgeson.
Yes, thank you. I want to appreciate everyone's testimony and then speak to two of the items that were brought to our attention. One is with respect to EWEB solar program, and there was a lot of detail, and I appreciated Stephen's forwarding to us the full text of his testimony because I did have the opportunity to review it prior to the meeting, and I can't address all of the individual points there, but I think there's some general sense of misalignment between EWEB's, the terms of EWEB's solar program and at least the interests of those who have made solar installations. I think that maybe some of this is due to some misunderstanding of the value and the costs associated with solar. I think, for example, I too have tree issues when I looked into solar. And I know that at least in the distant past, the rationale for EWEB's approach to the incentives with respect to tree and shading issues had to do with not wanting to recommend to customers and incent behavior that would extend the payback period for those installations beyond 15 years, because we didn't feel that that was a prudent thing for us to recommend for our customers, and that may be something that could be revisited. I think it's also true that the value of power in the summertime when these systems produce a surplus is certainly different than the value of power or the cost of power in the wintertime, and that's separate and in addition to the point that Commissioner Carlson made about the costs of recovering the investment and the operation of our distribution system. But I think because we've heard this sort of testimony before, and it's been some time since there's been a revisiting of EWEB solar program, it might be useful for staff at some point moving forward, particularly with new board members coming on, to provide a backgrounder that kind of reviews and touches on some of these issues with respect to EWEB's approach to solar and the benefits both to the community and or the utility, because I think there's some need at least for clarity, if not adjustments to our approach. So that would be my comment there. And then just on the Elliott Reservoir siting issues, I would hope, as this is my last meeting and opportunity to influence things, that we would continue to listen to the concerns of the neighbors there as we have been. I know staff has been trying to be very sensitive to this. I would hope that we would continue with an open and transparent process, and that as final siting decisions and timeframes for moving forward with construction are made, that at least the board have an opportunity to hear from staff about the considerations that go in ultimately to their recommended approach and location decisions. I know that work is underway and that is as of yet incomplete, and so I think it's premature to insist that the staff respond to all of that in the moment, but I would hope that when the time does come for staff to make those final siting decisions, that the board would have the opportunity to hear directly from staff as to the reasons for their recommendation and how they plan to move forward. So thank you for that, and thanks to the others for your testimony as well.
All right, well, Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, thank you, and I'd like to echo the sentiments of my other commissioners on thanking people for testifying. I assume, Frank, that Tana's comment was either timely, or is that the response to my inquiry in the last meeting of where all our money has gone for the educational programs if they're not doing field trips and solar challenges and things such as that, but you can respond to me later on that. And then Joe Mull, thank you for your testimony and things, and you never know, be careful what you ask for. I may just run just to spite you again. So that, and Jim New's comment about the banking, I share his concern, but I also know the logistics of when we initially tried to get more money into local banks, but we also, I know like OPEB, I think it's probably $14 or $15 million that's managed by US Bank alone, just in that one trust account. So there would be a lot of issues to deal with there. So, but I'm sure that we'll look into it. Thank you.
All right, well, I'll round out the responses from commissioners and then give Frank a chance to respond as well. I won't repeat some of the things that have been said, but largely I find myself in a supportive position of things I've heard from other commissioners. One little tidbit of information for Jim New, if you should read the minutes, I suppose, is that that contract comes up for review and renegotiation in 2022, so your comments are timely, and certainly we can add some environmental criteria to the set of criteria used to determine who ultimately wins that contract to manage our banking services. So that's something that can be done. Again, thanks to everybody for their testimony. Frank, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Mattel. Is my time up already?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry about that.
So anyway, thank you, President Mattel, commissioners. I'll add a couple of pieces of context to it. The banking issue is one that we did initiate in 2017, coming back up in 2022. There are a number of criteria that we can look at. It's the reason why we use a request for proposal approach, is that you can take a more triple bottom line look at various suppliers, including looking at climate and other sort of values-based criteria. On the issue of solar incentive, there's a couple things that I would like to weigh in on. One of them is that the incentive, which is based on the connected kilowatts, not the actual produced kilowatts, assumes that there's some degree of efficiency with that. That can be changed. That is a requirement that comes out of the Green Power program, and therefore would require a vote by the Green Power customers to change that policy. That is something that could be done, and we can explore doing that from an incentive perspective. But it's there because the incentive is based on connected solar capacity, not actually what's produced. So that's part of it. If we're ever compared with PG&E, I'll take that comparison almost any day. You know, the tiered rates and the time of use rates in that part of the world are, you know, 3 to 5 times higher than EWEB. And in fact, this issue is one of rate design, not just related to solar, but how do you recoup the balance between fixed cost and variable cost? That's one that I plan to work with the board on over the next several years to look at. Right now, Emerald PUD's basic charge is over 50% higher than EWEB's basic charge. And so this doesn't involve just generation, it involves the entire way that we would price our products. Presently, we don't need solar energy, and it comes at the wrong time. And so what we do is we pass along the value that we get when someone produces solar energy in the summertime primarily. And so there's reasons behind it. We will work a lot on rate design over the coming years, and that will be part of that discussion. And so it's relevant to consider these things when we do that. Relative to the East 40th property, whenever I hear the term clear cut, I have to step up and say our plan is really, we're anticipating maybe cutting about 25% of the trees on that property. And so I think, and I have complete confidence that staff is trying to consider public input as part of this process. However, you know, in that we will ultimately have to make some choices that some individuals just do not agree with. And so there's a number of things going on. We are looking at a triple bottom line placement of the tanks. That's probably a 2 or 3 month process, and we'll keep the board fully informed of the outcome of that. But I also think we're working with a number of different people relative to the impacts environmentally and otherwise. But I also know that some of these neighbors they are not going to like the outcome. And so, and I don't actually believe that it's their job to design and site the tanks. That's ultimately our job. So we are doing as much as possible to consider public input. And like I said, I have complete confidence that staff is doing that and they're doing it transparently. There will be more to come on that. In the first quarter was likely the next check-in relative to where we are in the environmental studies, as well as the geological studies and the triple bottom line looking at tank placement. So more to come on that. Appreciate all the input. We will continue to listen. And always learn from public input, but there's been some reasons we make certain decisions, and I appreciate the opportunity that commissioners give me to explain where some of those came from.
All right, well, thank you, Frank. And I'll just remind everybody who may be listening on the call that this issue of the tanks up there, 40th and Hilliard, has been visited and revisited several times over the last 2 or 3 months, and the board fully affirmed the position and approach that summarized by Frank just now. So we are moving forward, recognize that we're going to cause some angst for the those neighbors who live most close most close to the eventual site, and we are taking those things into consideration. But just want to reaffirm the board support that was given just last month. All right, we will move forward into general business items. The first, sorry, I just moved back to my agenda. First up is approval of consent calendar A. I'll just remind us that on the calendar includes the minutes from executive sessions and last month's regular session, plus 3 contracts. Do we have a motion to approve? I think that was John. John, you might be muted right now, but in any case, I think you made a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, great. We have any discussion prior to a vote?
This is Sonia. I just wanted to note that I appreciated the comments or the answers from staff on the transformer contract specifically, I noted that I was going to pull that, but they fully answered my concern there and outlined the differences between the two. So I'm in support and thank you.
All right, well, we have a motion. We have a second. I believe there's no interest in further discussion. So all those in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 All right, it looks like that passes unanimously. We'll move on to consent calendar B. There are no contracts, but there are several, or one intergovernmental agreement and 1, 2, 3, 4 resolutions. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Brown and seconded by Sonia Carlson. Anybody want to discuss any of these items before we move forward with a vote? Go ahead, Dick.
I'd like to ask briefly to pull the WGA item.
I'm not sure which one that is. Hold on just a second. Could we pull?
That's item 7, Commissioner or President.
Item 7, resolution number 2027. We will pull that. Any others that folks want to pull for discussion? All right, well, why don't we go ahead and vote to approve the remaining contracts. So that's items 5, 6, 8, and 9. I'm not really doing this right, am I? Why don't we just have the discussion with 2027 and maybe we'll be able to approve them all as a batch. Go ahead, Dick.
I just wanted to endorse the staff's recommendation and the passage of this resolution, and also state my appreciation to all of those past and current who have been involved on the operating committee or otherwise in managing this relationship with both Clatskanie and their mill up there over the years. I can fully understand why that relationship has probably at this point run its course. And I think that the value that's contemplated in terms of a sale of the asset is reasonable in consideration of any future value. And I just wanted to ask that when the operating committee meets and has an opportunity to take action on this themselves, that we convey on EWEB's behalf our appreciation to the other parties for their work with us over the past, I believe, 25 years or so in this cogeneration relationship that has been of some value. And I think also the subject of a former BPA billing credit, which Bonneville was involved in the earlier years. So that was the reason for my pulling the item, and I would be happy to take all of these items without any objection on the part of my peers at once as part of one singular motion. Looks like Frank wanted to weigh in.
He sure does. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Helgeson. I just wanted to extend appreciation to staff for getting value out of the end of this contract and extracting value out of it. I think they did a really awesome job, which included internal legal counsel from an EWEB staffer, Matt Schrotnig, and for all his work wading through the various legal aspects of how WANA and how WGA and Clatskanie and all that interacts. So appreciate your comments, Commissioner Helgeson. I know you know the history of this, and to get value like this out of something that is basically terminating, I think is actually really good news for us. Thank you.
I think it'd be a good idea to keep that same staff around as there may be similar issues that come up at some point with respect to the same cogen investment that we have out at the IP mill.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
All right, well, I believe we had a motion and a second to approve the entirety of consent calendar B, and the discussion didn't change that at all. So why don't we go ahead and vote? All those who in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 Looks like that passes unanimously as well. We will move on to our next item, and that's the 2021 proposed budget and prices with our Chief Financial Officer, Deborah Hart.
Well, good evening. Good evening, President Mattel and commissioners. We are here again this evening with budgets and price proposals. This is the third review of budgets and the second of the price proposals, and it's really a culmination of a process that started last June and has incorporated board feedback and direction over the last 6 months. With me here this evening is to present is Adam Root, the Fiscal Services Supervisor. Could I get the next slide? This evening, the materials for this meeting have had no substantive changes, with the exception of the reserve table edition that wasn't available in November. And then also, we're no longer recommending the creation of a Mackenzie Valley class because there have been so little change from what we previously presented. We're going to be brief this evening in our presentation. After the presentation, we will hold a final public hearing and then return to answer questions. And at that time, we'll be requesting board approval. With that, I'm going to pass it to Adam. I hope.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, Deborah. Thanks. Okay, this is a chart we've seen a couple of times now in October and November, and as Deborah mentioned, there's been no substantive changes to the budget document. We just included that one chart that we typically hold off including until we have a little more information on how this year's financial results turn out. And to kind of add on to her point about the process, this is a process that began in late spring, early summer, when we were talking about scenarios of COVID impact and different range of demand reductions we're expecting and some mitigation strategies. We've incorporated all that feedback in the budgets in terms of reduced travel and training budgets and other factors to mitigate the demand reductions. And this budget's been guided by those decisions and checked in with the board throughout the year. This is an item that we'll be asking for approval in a resolution later in the presentation or later in the meeting. Next slide, please. So as the last time we brought the financial plan, we did indicate that there are potential rate increases in the not too distant future. So I just wanted to highlight, take the opportunity to highlight the 5 years that we have had no overall rate increase for the electric utility and 4 years for the water utility. And mention that we haven't included any rate increase for this year's 2021 budget. We went through these items in a little bit more detail last month, so we've just highlighted which resolutions are associated with which items. We've had a more detailed discussion in the background or in Q&A with some of the commissioner questions. Finally, I just wanted to briefly mention a few items that we're not asking for approval. But just to mention that we did prepare a cost of services year, and we're not recommending implementing the results of that. Although there were some shifts among the classes, those were dependent to some extent on the demand reductions. So we're not recommending any implementation at this time. Last month, we also discussed briefly a potential multi-year rate proposals that would provide an opportunity to mitigate implementing the cost of service and spreading that over multiple years potentially. Finally, as Deborah mentioned, we've removed the upriver rate class proposal at this time, pending further communication with those customers and consideration by the board. So with that, I'll turn it back to Deborah.
Thanks, Adam. Next slide. Thank you. Management is recommending that the board approve budgets and price proposals as they were presented in the board materials. Next slide. Again, from here, we'll have our final public hearing and then return to answer questions and then seek board approval of resolutions 2028, 29, and 30, approving the 2021 budget and prices.
All right, well, thank you, Deborah. I believe I'm just going to do a process check with Ann And Frank, I think we'll go straight to public hearing, open that up, potentially close it right away if there's nobody waiting in the queue, and then return to commissioner questions and feedback. Is that about your sense of things, Frank?
Yes, that's correct, President.
All right, well, okay, thank you. So I'm going to open up a public hearing to address the 2021 proposed budget and prices. And could you let me know if there's anybody wishing to speak?
President Mytel, no one signed up to speak at the hearing this evening.
All right, well, now I am closing that public hearing, and we'll open it up to commission. We're moving on now, essentially, from item number 8 to item number 9. We have some 15 minutes that we could put on the clock for questions and feedback from commissioners. We will take this. Well, I'll just open up a queue. Let's see here. Hold on a second. Let me just make sure I can see everybody. If you would like to get in the queue, please raise your hand. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, President Mattel, I just wanted people to know if they're watching this for the first time, that staff started soliciting guidance from the board back in May. While this is just a snapshot, we have really appreciated the board's guidance and feedback, especially this year with all of the potential changes because of COVID economy impacts and other things. And so while it looks like, oh, here's $331 million of not a lot of potential discussion tonight, this has been at least 6 to 8 months of various back and forth that led to a lot of detail behind the scenes. So I wanted to thank the board for their feedback throughout that process, and also thank Deborah and Adam and their whole team for filling in all of the 90 pages worth of detail behind that, and really looking how we can keep rates flat in a year that is going to be a tough year for a lot of people. So I just wanted to say thank you to the board.
Well, and I'll say thank you to staff and just echo some of the comments made by Frank, and then I'll get your question or comment, Dick, that yeah, it's a long process. It often, some years are more controversial when you get down to December than others. This tends to be, I'd say, a much less controversial year, and most of the discussion has happened in the last few months. And so from a board perspective, I don't expect that there needs to be, or that there will be a lot of scrutiny at this point in time, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't significant attention paid during along the way. Go ahead, Dick, if you have questions, please ask them.
Well, I'll be brief as well. And I just wanted to add to some of the things that you've already said. So this is the culmination not only of a budget process that involves multiple discussions with the board that really commences, much earlier in the year, around June. It's also part of a long-term strategic plan and 10-year financial plan that the board engages regularly with the staff on, that allows us to give guidance and manage the trajectory of our costs and our rates. And as Adam pointed out earlier, this is the 4th and 5th year for water and electric of being able to have a balanced budget in challenging times, with no significant changes in staffing or resourcing, but in a manner that allows us to approve a balanced budget for yet another year without an increase in rates. And I think that's a very commendable achievement on the part of staff. And I appreciate very much the quality of your budget process and the document that is produced for public review, and also the fact that you bring us something that contains generally not a lot of surprise and is always consistent with the strategic plan and the 10-year financial plan. And I know that as time goes on without rate increases, that becomes increasingly challenging and will need to be revisited each year by the new board. But I commend you for your work, and another year of a budget that doesn't require any change in rates. So thank you.
Other folks who, go ahead, Sonia.
Great. Well, thank you again for such a a great process. I have felt like we've really had a lot of opportunity to provide good input along the way. Part of the reason why I asked the question that I did in the pre-meeting questions about how are we increasing budgets for both water and electric and still maintaining rates is in part because I think that there's a lot of staff effort, time, and a strategic plan that does go behind that, and I think it's really critical to look at that and celebrate that effort and that work. I did have one question. In the response, it said that purchase power costs are up. However, we'll have lower silt and lower transmission costs, and I was just hoping that staff could talk a little bit about kind of the reasoning for why some of those costs are up or down and why they're helping offset.
Sure. I'll take the first stab at that. The silt cost is a function of our retail revenue, so we get billed on retail revenue to the city. So since retail revenue is down, that's partially offsetting the silt offset by lower silt cost. Since we have less to remit to the city. For transmission costs, our kind of fixed infrastructure doesn't change depending on a single year's load reduction. But the biggest part of our transmission is Bonneville's NT transmission purchases, which we get billed on our peak demand for a specific hour. So if we have a lower demand, then there's a lower cost of Bonneville transmission. Mm-hmm. So okay. Those are kind of offsetting things. And then also when we have less to sell to retail customers, we have kind of a wholesale revenue offset. So we either are purchasing less or having more of our power to sell in the market. So kind of
I see. Okay. So we don't have to pay on all of for the silt. We don't pay for the wholesale revenue we get. It's only on the retail revenue for local.
Well, we pay the retail revenue silt, which is at 6% of retail revenue collected. We also pay a fixed amount for wholesale operations. In the past, we paid a different percentage on wholesale revenue, but I think since it's so volatile and goes up and down, the city wanted some budget stability, and so we negotiated a fixed number that we've had for the last several years.
Commissioner Carlson, I would just jump in and weigh in that the things that you're seeing go down are related to the retail side. The things that you might see go up are because there's a corresponding increase in wholesale business when your retail goes down. So, and that silt agreement was negotiated, I believe, in 2015 or so, kind of time frame, where it stabilized the wholesale side. So that's right. You've seen some go up and some go down.
I see. And can you remind me again, is that a contract? I think we talked about that earlier in the year. Is that a contract that's coming up again? Is that something that we negotiate on a regular basis, or is that something that kind of rolls over? How does that work? The first silt, specifically with the city.
I don't know if there's an end date on that, but Deborah, do you?
We'll have an opportunity to revisit the wholesale revenue, but the date is not at the top of my mind, or the wholesale silt.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, just a clarifying question. I know in one of Deborah's responses to Commissioner Schlossberg's questions, you talked about budgeting at 90%, and I know that we used to budget at 85% water, and then we debated and debated. This was with previous boards, and we went to 90, and then I thought we had done away with cutting it down to 90. And is it? Could you correct me? Are we still budgeting at 90% water year, or are we at 100% water year, or a 10-year average?
We're still budgeting in a 90% water year.
And
the recent change that, or the maybe more recent change that you saw is that in the 10-year forecast, right, we go out 5 years at the 90, and then in the back half of the plan, we go back to expected.
So
okay.
I would add a little bit of color commentary to that. What we did, Commissioner Brown, is to combine several risk factors into what we term as the contribution margin risk factor. That number, which is basically just a conservative number on the the wholesale piece is where we capture it. Could be when you get 90% water, or it could be if you get a 10% reduction in wholesale rates, for example, or you get, and I don't remember the exact retail because of weather conditions. So it's one number that captures a number of different conditions, and we call it the contribution margin risk factor, one of those conditions being the low water year.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Well, alrighty, I'm sure Sue would be proud. Deborah, good job to Adam and Deborah and the whole team. Thank you very much for bringing us, a balanced budget and not having to raise rates once again. I believe it's time to vote. Is that right? Frank, can you just remind me, can we take all three of these together, or do we need to do them one at a time?
That's a good question, President Mattel. Let's just do one at a time to be extra safe.
All right. Well, we'll start with resolution number 2028. That is the 2021 budgets. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right. All those in favor of approving resolution number 2028, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 All right, that passes unanimously. Now we'll take resolution number 2029. This is the electric customer service charges and prices. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Once again by Commissioner Carlson, and second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Schlossberg. All right, all those in favor of resolution 2029, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That also looks like it passes unanimously. And finally, we will take resolution number 2030. That's the February 2021 revised water prices. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
All right, that's a hat trick for Sonia. And do we have a second? Nobody. Well, I'll do it. I will be the second. Okay. Do we have? We will. Those in favor of approving resolution number 2030, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I think that approved unanimously. We have a break scheduled. I am just looking at what remains here and whether I should suggest just barreling through. Shall we? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Thumbs up means we're moving on. Thumbs down means I want to take a break. Looks to me like we're moving on. Okay, no break. There's no cheesecake, so why should we take a break? That's what I say, Frank. All right. Next up, we have resolution number 2031, EWEB's 2021 state legislative agenda. And we have Susan and Jason speaking, or perhaps just Jason, I'm not sure.
Susan, I'll go ahead and take it away unless you had anything you wanted to open with.
No, please,
No,
Jason, please.
Jason, I couldn't get to the mute button fast enough, so you go ahead.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, folks. It's good to see you all, commissioners, virtually. As you all know, it's that time in Oregon's constitutional calendar that the Oregon legislature assemble in Salem. It's an odd-numbered year, so it'll be the long session. I'm sorry, next slide, please. Again, it will be the long session, although I have a feeling that will be curtailed a little bit due to logistics. As you can imagine, you've all adapted to a new way of doing the people's business during this pandemic. The legislature has certainly gone to great lengths to do the same. However, given some of the logistical challenges, I do expect that the scope of the session and length will be smaller, and it's easy to see that there will be enormous emphasis specifically on COVID-19 and wildfire relief. I have a feeling you'll see fewer hearings, there will be fewer bills, things of the past such as courtesy hearings, as they're sometimes called. I don't think you'll see as many of those, or informational hearings. A quick post-election update. The legislative makeup has really changed very little. The Democrats maintained majorities in both the House and Senate. I think really only 1 or 2 seats really changed hands on a net basis. It's notable that the majorities are 3/5 majorities, which that's the necessary majority to have a revenue raising measure if it were to be a party line vote. However, those majorities fall short of a 2/3 quorum requirement that would mitigate the possibility of a legislative walkout. And that's notable, something to remember since we've had the last 2 legislative sessions conclude with walkouts. Next slide, please. So although the overwhelming focus will be on pandemic and wildfire relief and recovery, there's no doubt the legislature is not taking their eye off the ball when it comes to climate. I know there are many legislators in Salem that still see this as the next pandemic and it has to be addressed in some way. Oregon has been a leader on clean energy legislation. We had a landmark bill passed in 2007, the Oregon RPS. There was an update to that bill in 2016. You would think that to some extent the electric sector was sort of set, but just since 2016, we've seen California and Washington update their clean energy standards to go all the way to 100% clean. So we've recently been eclipsed by our neighbors to the north and south. Furthermore, we know that carbon pricing legislation most likely has no political path forward because of the lack of quorum. As a result of the walkouts last session, Governor Brown did take matters into her own hand and issued Executive Order on Climate 2004 to cap and reduce emissions. That order addresses transportation, industry, and natural gas, but very crucially, not electricity. And that's due to a lack of authority for the executive branch to regulate imported electricity. So you can see with those elements in place, it's not hard to imagine that Oregon will take a look at a standalone approach to move the ball forward in the electric sector. It's hard for me to imagine that a complex effort like that could be completed in a session like this with the challenging logistics, but I expect at a minimum, this will be a dress rehearsal for preparing legislation in the 2022 session. And there's a lot of, there's been a lot of turnover in the legislature. There are new members that were not around in 2016. They certainly weren't around in 2007. So we're going to want to do a lot of work this session. You only get one chance to make a first impression on new legislators. So we're going to want to make them apprised of the institutional history on clean energy legislation, as well as a lot of the lessons that we've learned about carbon pricing and overall least cost approaches to reducing carbon. Next slide, please. So definitely we know that carbon pricing is the least cost policy approach. We're advocates of that. If that's not going to be the policy approach, we've got to take all the lessons we've learned about elements that make carbon pricing a least cost approach and see if we can adapt those and apply those to any new clean energy law in Oregon. The easy place to start is technology neutrality. We understand why in 2007 hydropower did not fully qualify for the renewable portfolio standard. It's time for that to change. We need to have a truly technology neutral approach for all clean energy technologies to count equally. That really accomplishes 3 really crucial goals if you have a technology neutral approach. First, we know from the 7th Power Plan that the Northwest Power Council did, a least cost approach to decarbonizing the Northwest. A crucial element is using surplus regional hydropower inside the region instead of exporting it. If hydropower doesn't qualify for the Oregon RPS, that can be an impediment to using that surplus hydro in the region. If we can make sure we use that hydro in the region, we'll avoid overbuilding unnecessary generation. Overbuilding increases costs to retail electric customers, and it also even further erodes wholesale power prices in the region, which creates its own set of issues, of problems. And finally, this rectifies a very basic fairness issue as far as resources, different resource types competing with one another. If hydropower can't be used for RPS compliance by, say, Portland General Electric, for example. If Portland General Electric does an RFP for new energy procurement, hydropower is at a disadvantage trying to respond to that RFP. So these are really three crucial elements of a least cost approach to clean energy legislation. And I think we should be happy to take up the mantle of technology neutrality in any new changes to clean energy law in Oregon. Finally, there's a really crucial element of the RPS we're going to want to see stay in place. In 2007, the legislature came up with a definition of a bundled renewable energy certificate. That's the currency used to show compliance with the RPS. We came up with an approach that was determined by whether or not an entity procured the electricity and the environmental attributes as embodied by the REC, whether you acquired those together. If you acquired those together, that determined what was a bundled REC. We're going to want to see that stay intact. That was chosen for a very crucial reason, and I think we really got it right in 2007. I know there is some discussion of an alternative approach, which sometimes is called flow-based accounting, and that's where legislation is tracked from the source to the end use and consumption. If that alternative approach was utilized, that would make compliance incredibly complex and labor intensive, and most likely would lead to overbuilding of resources. And I can see no discernible environmental benefit or enhanced carbon reduction benefit that would come from using that more complex and costly approach. So we're going to want to plug the 2007 approach as being an example of not only getting it right then, but a policy that still makes sense today. Next slide, please. Another legislative proposal we're expecting to move forward is a requirement from the legislature that utilities complete wildfire mitigation plans that are risk-based. This is a repeat of legislation we saw in 2019 and 2020. Both times those bills essentially stalled because of the walkout. The legislature has pretty much picked up where they left off. This bill is almost identical, or the draft that we've seen is almost identical to previous bills. And we're pleased to see that local decision-making it seems to still be in place here. The EWEB board would adopt the plan. There would be a requirement to remit the plan to the Oregon Public Utility Commission, but the PUC would have no role other than simply to be a repository of all the plans around the state. The plans would be required to be adopted by December 31st of 2021. From internal conversations at EWEB, that would not be a problem for us. We can easily make that part of our work plan in 2021. Next slide, please. This last item, it may feel a little open-ended and amorphous, and that's because it is. It's not something that's totally in focus yet, but I want to make sure you're apprised of likely work that we'll do in this area in the upcoming session. COVID-19 and wildfire impacts to EWEB customers. We know that many EWEB customers and Lane County residents are hurting from these two disasters. There is a concerted effort locally to get on a road to relief and recovery. That's most likely going to exceed what local resources can provide. There's going to be a role for the state to play on these matters. EWEB's been part of a local effort to determine all the needs that are there and what would be unmet. We're consulting with local governments, community agencies, and fire-affected residents themselves we're going to have some kind of role advocating in Salem on behalf of affected customers and residents. It's not in focus yet, but I think some examples could include customer bill assistance, more energy bill assistance, but also crucially water bill assistance, which was not addressed in the previous assistance the state provided earlier this year. Telecommunications connectivity in the McKenzie corridor, watershed recovery. These are a couple of examples. We'll be happy to provide you a memo or otherwise update you in January when we know more about what specific ask will likely be made to the state of Oregon in the upcoming legislative session. And that's all I have. I'm ready to take questions. Real quickly, I will tell you, it's always been customary for the EWEB board to have an advocacy day at the Capitol. I think it would be great if we planned on doing that again. Obviously, we'll do it completely differently. It would have to be done virtually, but I see no reason why we couldn't continue that tradition. And as a bonus, you don't have to worry about me getting you lost in the Capitol basement this time. So.
Thanks, Jason. All right, we will open up a queue. Please, yeah, raise your hand if you'd like to jump into that queue. Well, I'll go first while others may be pondering questions. It's Jason, I kind of alluded to this earlier in an email, just so you'd have some advance warning. I just wanted to just try and learn a little bit more about the flow accounting. So you're telling us that there seems to be very little practical benefit and a lot of complexity that would likely get introduced. I don't doubt that. So therefore, I am trying to understand what the advocates of flow accounting see as value coming out of this.
You know, I will tell you, I would struggle to articulate it, but I'll take a shot. I think it's a verification. They want some kind of double verification that clean energy was utilized, and to some extent, it might be true that they want to draw the circle a little smaller about where energy comes from. That's possible, but I see no discernible environmental benefit. I mean, there's even a case to be made that it could work against decarbonization. One of the reasons being, if we were to move to an approach that required tracking of generation, renewable generation, all the way to its end use, that's very incongruous with the direction that organized, centralized electricity markets in the West are moving. Those markets are not markets that are going to be compatible with a source to load end use tracking. And I think that would be unfortunate because those markets are, those centralized markets are very likely crucial to seeing the Western United States reach regional decarbonization goals. So I'm hoping we'll prevail to the advocates of this approach that it's really not going to give the desired result they want. It may even run counter to some crucial goals to create centralized markets and get us on the track to that clean energy future. But I think it's a verification issue that they feel like they would be more confident if there was a verification. But I think most people in the energy industry will say that it's really not necessary. People build resources or sign long-term power purchase agreements to use that energy for their own load primarily. There's some cases where you may not because you're long with energy, and EWEB's been in that exact position sometimes. But it's really a verification that probably just isn't really necessary.
All right, well, thank you. I'll before my time's up, I'll also just say that I am very much in support of attempts to have hydropower treated the same as other low carbon energy resources that we have in the region. So I'm hopeful that we'll prevail with that and thankful for your advocacy on that. Anybody else? Go ahead, Dick.
I agree with Commissioner Mattal's comments just made about hydropower. I think it's perhaps, I appreciate that people have issues with hydropower that have to do with fisheries and a host of things that get managed in other contexts. We do pay costs associated with mitigating those impacts, both in terms of commitments made in relicensing those projects and also in amounts that are paid and included in rates for fish programs of all manner, which, if nothing else, comprise a very significant portion of Bonneville's budget. So I think it's a little disingenuous to try to take another bite at that by excluding existing legacy hydro from this calculation when it really doesn't contribute to our carbon footprint. The other comment I'll make quickly, and you don't have to respond because I know that you'll work this issue diligently, but I find it kind of ironic that when we make the point that a carbon tax or some kind of carbon cost would be the most efficient way to get to our climate mitigation goals, that the Republicans would choose to walk out on that, but might gladly join some of them an increase in the RPS standard when at the end of the day it's the same people that will pay, in fact, higher costs under that strategy. And I don't know whether they would choose to walk out on that kind of a proposal, but at the end of the day, it's in the interests of our customers to take steps to mitigate the climate issues that are before us, but at the same time to do that in a way that's as cost effective as possible. And at the end of the day, we all know and understand that those costs will flow to our customers in one form or other. And so we take the positions that we do because it's our obligation to do what is necessary and important, but also to do that in a way that minimizes the cost and the impact to them. So thank you again for your work, and I look forward to reading about your successes in the newspaper. And I'm sorry that I'll miss that next trip to the basement of the Capitol.
Anybody else? Sonia, I don't see you right now. I don't know why that is, but is your hand up by any chance?
No, I turned my video off for a second.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate all of the, I didn't have any other questions to add, but I do appreciate the update and look forward to coming and joining you in the Capitol, or not joining you in the Capitol, but virtually joining you in the Capitol at some point in the next few months.
Alrighty, well, I'm sensing that that's as much discussion as we need to have before taking a vote. So I am going to ask for a motion for resolution number 2031.
All right, move to approve.
Alrighty, and a second. I'll give it a second. Looks like I beat you to that one, Dick. Sorry.
All right.
All right,
No
we
problem.
have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion? In that case, all those in favor of approving resolution number 2031, our 2021 state legislative agenda, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oh,
All righty, that passes unanimously, and that takes care of general business items for the calendar year 2020. Correspondence and board agendas. Thanks, Jason, by the way. All right, Frank, it's yours. You have 10 minutes.
Yeah, President Mattal, Commissioners, thanks again. I'd like to start with the agendas this time. Normally we start with correspondence, but I'd like to start with the agendas given that we have some pretty significant early year topics that I'd like to highlight. First of all, in February, we have teed up the Lieberg Canal discussion. This is both in separate sessions, a technical review, and then also a financial review, and that's teed up for February, as well as our drinking water source protection and recovery planning. That was something that rightfully so, recognizing the changes in the watershed, that we will bring back to the board to take a look at how we want to change and how we want to move forward with that. So that's in February. In March, we do have, and you heard Jason refer to wildfire mitigation. We've got a presentation to the board on wildfire mitigation practices, as well as a more complete AMI program update. Those are both in March. And then in April, we have our Upriver board meeting tentatively scheduled for April 20th. What you don't see on the calendar yet, and I'm not using this as a specific date right now, but sometime in March, likely, I would like to have a strategic workshop with the board. We will have, if you consider who participated in the last strategic planning effort, we will have 3 board members on the board, 3 commissioners on the board who did not participate in the last strategic work. So sometime in, I'm kind of tentatively looking at March 23rd, but that'll be, depending on commissioner schedules, it'll either be sometime in that range, either late March, early April, where we can do some strategic work. I think that'll be important with the new makeup of the board and taking a look at how we want to adjust going forward. I wouldn't expect a student body left wholesale change, but I think there are some things that we would want to take into account, the situational analysis of where we are and where we'd like to go. So that's not on the calendar yet, but I wanted to point it out that we will be reaching out to talk about that. From a correspondence perspective, there were really 2 items. One was the 2020 year-end audit planning letter. That's from Moss Adams. I think probably everybody on the board is familiar with that process now. That tends to get started. It intensifies in the first quarter, primarily with with Deborah's staff. And then a final report out on audited financial statements in April. So that is just the beginning of the background for that work. And then there was also in correspondence the 2019, and again, this is 2019, so this is not 2020. This is a whole kind of year old, the operational greenhouse gas inventory report. In 2011, just for background, EWEB set forward some goals to reduce our operational greenhouse gas levels by 25% by 2020 and 50% by 2030. We are on track for both of those. And it's worth noting that the GHG report is for operational only. It's not for total electricity generation, for example. And it's for 2019 primarily because many of the regional carbon intensity data is not compiled from the previous year until quite a ways into the next year after that. So we'll incorporate operational information in our report out for the 2020 goals because we have some broader goals around carbon mitigation. We'll do that as we report out our 2020 goals. And so I'd be happy to entertain. Lisa may be on the line as well if commissioners have any questions about that, or if you have any questions about the upcoming financial audit.
Dick, did you catch all of that? You got a question?
No, I just wanted to endorse your comments about using the market-based approach to this tally as opposed to the location-based approach. I won't pursue that here or ask for a staff response, but I fully endorse the comments that you provided prior to the meeting. And I think the failure to use the market-based approach as kind of the lead tally sort of denies us the opportunity to take credit for and bank the savings that occur as a result of actions that we've taken to green our portfolio. And it's kind of ironic to me that in this case, we'd use the location based as kind of the marker when for other purposes, when we talk about the greenness of our portfolio and the opportunities that exist for electrification, we tend to point to something that's more akin to the market-based approach. So I'll just leave it there. It's probably not worth much at this late juncture in my tenure, but I thought you made some good points.
Thanks, Dick. Go ahead, Sonia.
I wanted to note on the greenhouse gas emissions, the fact that goals were set and are actually on track to be achieved is another thing to be applauded. I typically see in that realm that goals are set, and I don't think that our goals are unambitious either. And then, you know, as you kind of look at the track record of those goals, the gap gets bigger and bigger. And so it's really refreshing to see that we're not in that boat. And I appreciate the work to keep it that way and to really hit the target. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll just chime in as well. Some of the things that caught my attention were the 11% electricity reduction. I think I said in the comments is remarkable and bears some additional, you know, analysis as to what it is that we did to achieve that. It's a lot. And, you know, we didn't, because we're not significantly different in terms of our operational footprint in this town as compared to now comparing back to 2011. So I found that pretty incredible. And SF6 emissions, which, you know, sort of crop up some years but then die back. I know we've taken a lot of effort to work on that. And same thing with the fuel switching away from a pretty dirty source that produced our steam that we circulate around town and kind of move that off of our books. So those are all, in my mind, some really neat achievements, and congratulations to Lisa and all the staff who are responsible for that work over the years. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I am sorry that you won't be around to have the debate, Commissioner Helgeson, on which type of accounting to use. I think it's, I would agree that a lot of the decisions that we can make as an individual utility do better get captured by a market-based approach than a location-based approach. I would argue with you a bit, and it would be a very healthy debate, that when you look at the actual environmental impact, you have to look beyond the borders of the decisions that we make, which would be more of a regional base. And that would be because the grid, and in fact, all energy systems are so interconnected across the region that if we do something, it's not done in isolation. And so that would be, you know, that'd be a very healthy debate. We don't, I won't debate it here, even though we're ahead of schedule, but I absolutely appreciate your points around using the market-based approach does capture the decisions that we have historically made more appropriately. The other things that I would note is a significant amount of work the last really almost decade now from when we started this has been done by our fleet department relative to the types of fuels that we use. There's a tremendous amount of work and analysis that goes into whatever type of renewable fuel we're going to use, the idling practices. There's a whole bunch of things that go into that and how we manage our fleet, and our fleet staff has done a really good job of trying to expose that as one of the significant sources that can generate operationally. So a lot of credit to be spread around. We also make decisions around using things like variable frequency drives instead of just for operating motors more efficiently and some of the other high use devices. So there's a lot of automation, which rolls into some of those reasons that you talked about, President Mattel, relative to where we've seen some of the electricity savings. Those all are sort of captured in the efficiency work that we do. And then SF6, very potent, part of our, it's the only option that we really have for small space designs at the high voltage levels. It's 23,000 times more potent than CO2. And so we're very careful with how we monitor, how we handle that, how we track for leaks, you know, all of that. We're still under the levels of required reporting, but we voluntarily report that any kind of significant leak there. So really appreciate your comments, and there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes, but and more debate to come on the various ways of accounting for these types of things, I'm sure. Thank you, President Mattel.
Thank you. Any other, Lisa, did you want to chime in about any of those items?
I just wanted to, while I've got just a minute to take the floor, just appreciate Frank chimed in what I was going to say, which was really the efforts that our fleet department and our fleet supervisor in particular has really done to kind of green our fleet with alternative fuels. That is far and away the thing that we have the most control of, direct control over, to reduce our emissions, and is largely responsible for not only our ability to meet the goals that were set a number of years ago, but to actually exceed them. We're on track to exceed them. We're on track to meet our 2030 goal by next year if things go the way we think that they will. And so that's 9 years in advance of what we set out to do. So I also want to applaud that team, and then also the environmental team and the rest of the organization in general that has really put some thought and effort into reducing our carbon footprint. So thank you for the opportunity to share that, and I appreciate your interest in the report.
All right, well, thank you. All right, well, we will, well, let me just ask real quick, does anybody want to bring up any of the other items that Frank touched on in his summary? Well, all right, then it's time for the infamous item number 13. It feels a little strange to preside over your own dirge. I'm not sure what we are doing here, to be totally honest. But Mindy, is this something you want to take the lead on as the vice president about to become president?
I don't know exactly who planned all of this, but maybe Frank? Did you have something in particular?
Did Frank drop off?
I don't know.
You're on mute there, Frank.
Yeah.
Well,
I can jump in and save a couple of minutes if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Shelna.
I almost hesitated because I almost wanted this to be the last one. I wanted to change the agenda around because I'm worried that I'm going to cry. I'm already feeling a little teary. I was reaching around for my Kleenex earlier. It's been a real pleasure to serve with both of you over the last number of years, and I appreciate the wittiness. I appreciate the camaraderie that we've all shared. I appreciate the various perspectives and the really engaging commentary that we've had. And while I'm appreciative that we have 2 new board members that are coming on, very much going to miss all of the service that you've put in over the last number of years. Sorry, I'm crying. Okay. And I'm really sad that we're not getting to be able to be together to share this. I mean, 8 years, and for you, Steve and Dick, you've been on, involved with EWEB for what, 40 plus years? I mean, almost 40 years. That is just incredible. The amount of history and knowledge that you've brought to this organization to make it to better serve the community is just remarkable. And you're both really going to be missed. So I know that this is, maybe Dick said earlier, this was his last opportunity to influence, and I don't think that's the case. I know we've seen other board members come back and share, and I hope that we can reach out to the both of you from time to time, because again, I've really appreciated your perspectives on various matters, and I'll try to channel, and I think others will as well, try to channel some of the passion that you brought to various topics too, because it may be that others will have different different interests, but I think that they were very valid. And even though in your time you may not have gotten to achieve everything that you wanted, but I'll try to carry the torch a little bit. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Very much appreciate it. Go ahead, Frank.
May I say something? I mean,
of course. Can I stop you?
This is going to be sugar coated, right? You guys have been absolutely amazing to work with, and you've taught me a lot. You've taught me a lot about the industry, and you've taught me a lot about human interactions and learning to accept different perspectives and things such as that. But I've done a little thing, I wore the bowling shirt tonight just to remind you guys.
Yeah.
We all teamed up and we got into our lovely khakis and we held hands and sang songs. But Dick, I made a little compilation. I have a set of CDs of all your input. There's 435 of them, 1 hour each, and they're on sale right now. And I also have a 350-page glossary of all the words you use that have 4 more syllables, and so that's also on sale. And you can get them all real independently. Steve, I'm not going to have to worry about my fishing poles anymore, or how to do this, and how to fish and how to catch stuff. But in all seriousness, you're not going to be going away. I mean, you're just, like I say, I've said before, my little isms. It's kind of like, watching my mother-in-law leave with my new Cadillac. I don't know whether to be happy or sad, but happy for you. You're going to get some great time, and sad that I don't get to have this interaction with you guys before. And Dick, I still owe you a dose of poison oak. Just there's a little inside joke, and but I am very, very pleased to see that you met a challenge in health and you came through it, and that had us all concerned very much so. And Steve, everything you've gone through and everything. So I wish you both the best in whatever endeavors you do, but don't become strangers, please. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in here, if that's okay. I just want to say selfishly how much I've appreciated serving on this board with you. It's pretty intimidating joining this board. There's a lot to know, and there's a lot of different people. And you've both been so kind and welcoming, and I have so appreciated just kind of soaking up your knowledge, your leadership skills. I've really appreciated that. Steve, I have been paying particular close attention to how you lead these meetings over the last few months, because I know that soon it will be my turn, and you do it so deftly, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sorry that I only get to serve with you for 2 years, but I'm just so grateful for everything that you've done, and I've really appreciated both of you. So thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Frank. You done walking the dog now? You're back?
Yeah, I'm back. My computer locked up just at the wrong time, so I appreciate the opportunity to comment. Dick and Steve, did you actually get packages this afternoon?
Well, we did, and they're sitting here.
Yeah, you can open those up if you would like. And then I've got a couple other slides to show.
I will. Good. I'm opening mine right now. Thank you.
As am I.
Oh my gosh. Can you all see this if I hold it up like that?
Yeah, if you click on the faces, you can enlarge, Steve up to go away from the presentation. So Dick has one piece of it, which is basically our way of thanking you, commemorative plaque. Appreciate 40 years for you, Dick Helgeson, and including your EWEB terms, and then Steve Mattel, 8 years of leadership on the board, and definitely extend that. But I would like to go back to, and that's a water meter, by the way. Dick would probably recognize that.
Yeah, we probably got a lot of these for the smart meters going in, right?
Yeah, we got a pretty good deal on those. But it was, it was a little easier to fit in a package than a fire hydrant, which there was a former employee who got a fire hydrant, so I'm not sure those would fit.
Yeah, well, fire hydrants don't always smell so good, but so appreciate this. Yeah.
So yeah, we can go. Let's go back to the presentation. So if you click on the presentation, we'll just run through the next slide. So Steve, it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. You have helped staff tremendously over these last years. Here's just some of the highlights from your time. We appreciate what you've brought to the board. You and I have a couple of signals that we know there's multiple meanings of, and so I've appreciated the relationship and working with you these past 4 years in particular, but I do remember sitting with you in the audience. I think it was back in 2011 or so, when I used to just go to board meetings for the fun of it. Now I have to, but you used to go and you were always doing your homework before you became a commissioner. So I think that was 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. And so I've learned a lot from you. I still have a Steve Mattel list with a few open items on it, just so you know. I haven't forgotten about those, and I'm sure we'll be talking about those going forward, especially something about a fence in the Willamette River or something, being one of those things. So Steve, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Learned a lot, and hope you've got a lot out of it too. The next slide is. Go ahead with the next slide if you can. This is Dick Helgeson in various stages of his contribution. Still have to love the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in the lower right. That's got to be a highlight. But you know, Dick, starting in 1978, I'm not even sure what was going on in 1978. I think that's
because you weren't born yet.
Yeah, I was around. I certainly remember 1978, but not that well. Thanks for not only your help on the board, but just your contributions through the decades for EWEB. You've really had a lot of influence on the community and helping the board and helping staff and management, and it's challenged us. In fact, both you and Steve have challenged us to be better. And I think that's the role of a board. I expect that to continue with the members that are on the board now and the new members. And so I just, on behalf of management and staff, wanted to thank both of you very sincerely from the bottom of our hearts for the contributions and the help along the way. So thank you. On behalf of management and staff for your service.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for the gifts. Thanks for the kind words. Dick, I assume you might have a thing or two to say, and I suppose I do as well. Would you like to go first?
Okay, I would. Sort of like John Brown at the beginning of the meeting, this is the part that I, in some respects, wasn't looking forward to, because like many of us, I have trouble with goodbyes, and I don't take praise very easily for some reason. So I just want to tell you how grateful I am for the opportunity to having served with all of you as an EWEB commissioner. I want to thank our customers and all of you for not only the good work that you do, I think also for your friendship, and I want you to know how important EWEB is. I think all of you on the board know this, and that's why you're part of the organization in a governance role. The work that we do matters to the whole community in ways that are really important. And for all of us that have had the privilege of working at EWEB, I want you to know that those of you who will carry on that work are doing important work, even if sometimes it doesn't seem that the community is always paying attention or thankful for what we do. It's meaningful work, it's worthy work, and it's public service, and I think that's one of the highest forms of service that any of us can engage. And so I want to thank you all, and I also want to give a shout out to Ann and Holly for their support to the board. I think there have been several times when I would have been late to meetings or showing up in the wrong place had it not been for their good guidance and reminders and help with all manner of things. So thank you to Ann and Holly for that. And thanks to my fellow board members who I think we've worked well together. I look forward to seeing all of the new board functioning and getting up to speed, and I have every confidence that you'll carry on the good work that we've all engaged over the last 8 years. So thank you for your acknowledgement and all of the time that we've spent together and your friendship. I hope that we run into each other, and maybe Steve and I will come and give you 6 minutes worth of our joint testimony on the virtues of these various accounting methods for carbon.
Well, I'll thank Dick.
John, I want to thank you in particular for your support. You made reference to some of the challenges I faced on the health front a couple of years ago, and I wasn't really going to mention this because it's you know, it's kind of personal, but that meant a lot to me, and you're a good human being. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll try and round it out. I'll just have to say that I have loved my 8 years on this board, and I didn't really know what to expect. I was when I first came on the board, I was super fearful of Robert's rules and the protocols, and I think everybody could probably tell I've gotten really comfortable in the role and enjoyed it so much, and I have learned, you know, how to work, you know, with and around those things. So in any case, I think what I'm trying to say, I have learned so much. You know, I have a couple of graduate degrees I got from the U of O, but honestly, I think I learned more about the things, you know, that really matter to me substantively: energy issues, Pacific Northwest environmental issues, and how energy and water kind of play in those, but also about interpersonal dynamics. Sean mentioned that, leadership, working with folks, respecting others, and I've grown quite a bit, and I'm really thankful to all the folks who contributed to that. It's my fellow board members, Frank, the leadership team, a whole bunch of folks, of course, who have moved on to other positions or retired, lots of different staff, and of course has always been fantastic, Holly, as well. Thank you for bringing the cake by. I think it is. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet earlier today. So I have grown so much and changed a lot, and so I just want to you know, remind myself and others that you know, you come into these positions and you think you know something, and you do to an extent, but you certainly learn quite a bit. For me, it was sort of poignant that we had the testimony this evening from the one man, I've forgotten his name, I think it was Stephen Goldman, who was really upset about the solar prices. And that's pretty much exactly the place that I started when I came on the board. I thought that, you know, that rooftop solar on, you know, on every house would be a good thing. And I've learned a lot about why it is, but also why it isn't from a community perspective. And so so that issue sort of came up for me tonight. In any case, I'll round it up by mostly just thanking everybody. It's been an absolutely fantastic experience for me personally. I think I got honestly more than I gave, but I'm glad to have given something as well. All righty, it's I guess I'm still president, so it means it's my job to move to the next item, and that's item number 14, board wrap up. I don't know that there is any, but if there is, now's the time. Sonia, go ahead.
Well, knowing that next month we'll be voting on, you know, various different positions and such, it always felt a little weird to me when I started that the first thing we do is we elect officers and we appoint people to boards and such. And it seems like right now there's a lot of knowledge potentially going out, and I wanted to maybe open it up and see if anyone wanted to talk about the various positions that they've held that are up for review, because I know that our other two board members, I believe, are still on the call, and it might be beneficial for them to know kind of what is coming up, pass along a little bit of the knowledge to the next group. I know, Dick, you had been serving with the MPPA, and I don't think that that's something that carries over. That's not nobody else can serve on that, is my.
Well,
maybe I'm
actually,
incorrect on that, but
let me comment on that briefly. I will need to resign from that board given the circumstances, to give them notice. I will also talk with Frank, and maybe he can talk with Scott Corwin, who's the CEO up there, about opportunities for other board members should any of you wish to continue that involvement. I don't think it's necessary or essential. It's a good organization. John Brown has a little bit of knowledge as well about what they do and how that relates to our operations. So it's not necessary for us to maintain that participation, but I will certainly work with Frank to make sure that a path forward is available to the board should any of you or our new board members wish to continue that association. It involves a nominations process and the seating of new board members on that board in June. So I'll work with Frank to make sure you have the information that you would need to follow up on that should you wish. And otherwise would have Frank, should you not, give our apologies and good wishes along with my resignation letter.
Thank you. And Steve, I think you had been serving as a liaison for some of the other utilities. Or was that last year?
Well, I mean, I'm doing that a little bit with sub these days. Yep, and I did it a little bit. We didn't have too much interaction, quite frankly, with the folks over at Lane Electric. But so there's a little bit of that. Honestly, that's better, sort of best managed, I think, in one-on-one, informal relationships than trying to be, having too much formal engagement. Things get lost.
Sure, absolutely. And for me, I've served on the LCOG, the Lane Council of Governments board for the last year, and I've been serving on the executive committee. The position for the executive committee, I did let them know that we would be interested as an organization in serving on that again. I am interested in running for it, though. If others have a significant interest, open to that. Basically, it's a meeting once a quarter for the regular board, and then the executive board meets once every month. And then there's other various committees that are associated with that, but it's Lane Council of Governments, as you can imagine, association of a number of the different governments that have chosen to opt in and work together around various issues in the community. So if anybody's interested in that and wants to learn more about that organization, I'm more than happy to meet with them at another time. Okay. All right, well, thanks for that opportunity. I thought it might just be helpful. And I think John Brown was on the board. I don't know if he wants to give a little bit of information about that, but anyway, I just found it was when we're joining the board, it's like the first thing that we do and you have no idea what you're voting on. So, getting a little up to speed on it would be maybe helpful to think about before we're making those choices. So.
Yeah.
On that note, I suddenly feel like the dead guy who just, who wakes up after everybody said some nice things to remind folks that now that I think about it, I think I have like 5 minutes worth of duties at our January meeting, which is actually to preside over the election of officers and then hand over the gavel to the next board president, which I expect would be Mindy. So I hadn't actually thought about that until now, but maybe there's some way to avoid that. But I think that's actually the process that normally happens. Sorry, John, you were going to say.
No, I would just the OPEB. That's a quarterly meeting. You're a non-voting member. It's basically informational only about the retirees and their and the healthcare benefits and things and the funding of that, making sure it's funded. It's a pretty easy position to have, and if somebody, one of the new individuals or anybody else wants to have it, I'm open to that, because if we have to have somebody at MWPPA, I would consider that too, going into that. So I'm also curious on how the process is of swearing in. Do they do that remotely now, or do they do that in person?
They can do that virtually, John.
Virtually? Okay.
And then I just want to add that I serve in a committee, whatever, with the city, liaising with the city. That's what it is. And it's newish. We've only done it for the last year and a half, maybe, and we meet quarterly. And I believe it's supposed to be the president and one other board member. So there will be an opening for somebody who wants to join us there. And we're supposed to mainly talk about climate issues and how it relates, how EWEB and the city can work together. But oftentimes we also just talk about other places where we overlap, a lot of relationship building and keeping each other in the loop.
All right, any last discussion items before we wrap up? Well, has been a pleasure serving with you all. I hope everybody has a really, peaceful and relaxing end of year holiday season. And with that, we shall adjourn. Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you. Good night.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody. It's been an interesting 2020.
Yes, it has.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, memorable. Yeah.